And that's actually happening. This is not something that might happen. There's only a question of what is the rate of it happening, which it is accelerating. The oceans are been the place, the reason we're not dead now is that the oceans have absorbed most of the CO2 that we're putting out, but that's getting harder to do, and the oceans are getting more acidic as they absorb more CO2. And there's some point, and speaking of these threshold points, there's some point where plankton shells, or the shells, seashells won't form anymore because of the acid, and then those animals can't grow. And there's just like a certain pH factor that does that. And eventually, if this runs away, the oceans start giving up that CO2, and that won't be very good either. Going back to history, 55 million years ago, the frozen methane at the bottom of the ocean, that's a really scary thing. It's maybe a great source of fuel, but it mentioned that one thing that happens when it melts is the continental shelf can fall and wipe out the entire east coast of the United States. But even worse than that, believe it or not, is that there's incredible amount. Methane is far worse than CO2, far, far worse as a greenhouse gas. It doesn't last as long in the atmosphere, and there's not as much of it, so fortunately for us. But this is so much that it would just basically end the world as we know it. He mentioned China. Here's a picture of daytime in China. 1 or 2 coal plants a week. I'm not sure what the right number is, but they're certainly, if they haven't surpassed us yet in CO2, they're about to. And that's gives you pause, but I mean, as I'll say at the end, we still have to do what we need to do, because there's no way they're going to do anything about it until we do. They're going to think we're trying to fool them into reducing their economy while we continue with ours. So we really need to get on the ball. Stern Review, you might have heard about this. It took a look from an economic impact. Does it make sense to address climate change? And the bottom line that it does. It's a bargain, actually, to do it now. So we can either reduce our GDP by 1 to 3%, let's say, over a fairly long period of time, or do nothing and have total economic collapse. So here's our choices, what we can do. First of all, maybe there isn't any climate change. We'll get back to that in a moment. Or maybe there is climate change, right? So then we have a choice. We do something or we don't. That's our little simple matrix. Let's see, if there's no climate change and we do something about it, we waste a lot of money and we end up still with a better world. We have a lot of cool technology. We have more energy security. We have cleaner world, better habitats. So that's, but we wasted a lot of money. So the climate change deniers focus on this and say, hey, they believe it's not true. Of course, the people, by the way, I liken that if you go to your doctor and he says you have cancer, you need to, take treatment. Doctor, I'm going to go get another opinion. I'm going to go talk to a meteorologist. The people who know tell us it's true. Some people want to disagree. And then if we don't act and nothing happens, well, then we're fine, okay, because there wasn't climate change. But now let's say there is climate change and we act. Well, we spend a lot of money. We save billions of lives. We invent new cool things. And we still have more energy security and a better world. So that's actually a good thing. And if we don't, well, billions of people will die. There'll be large-scale wars, because when a country like one of the first is going to happen to is Pakistan, runs out of water because the rivers upstream from them run dry, and of course India and the other countries upstream are taking the last bits of water, they're not going to just sit around and let that happen. And they have nuclear weapons. So and that's just one tiny example. If you've seen the movie, you know there's a lot of bad things can happen. Well, just kind of multiply that out quite a bit. So we don't want that. And since we happen to know those two, no, climate change is not true. This, by the way, basic physics. It's not, it's not opinion. It's physics. So that probably seems like the right thing to do. So how do we prepare? Well, we have to stop emitting CO2. We have to stop burning fossil fuels or get rid of the carbon from them, which is actually a good thing. We need to all work together to invent new ways of powering the planet without increasing greenhouse gas. We have to rethink everything we do, because unfortunately, I'd like to tell you that this is something that, when people think about climate change, they think in 2100. 2100, we might have 2 feet of more sea level. Gee, well, I can kind of deal with that. We're talking about 2010, 2020. It's going to be really serious impacts. If any of these things happen, which could happen anytime, it's like playing Russian roulette with kind of a few bullets in the chamber, we're in trouble then. And the problem is you can't then decide to do something about it. Now is the time we have to do something about it. So talk to your elected leaders, and then, I'm not actually worried about this for myself. I guess I'm going to die, we're all going to die, that's fine, and I think the time frames for folks our age, not that much of an impact. But I think that for our children, and certainly our grandchildren, the world is going to be a very different place. And I don't think it's actually possible at this point to avoid it being bad. But it could be a lot worse than bad if we don't do something about it. And we actually have the tools to do something about it. I'm just kind of frustrated that we're not doing something about it. So what can Cornell do? We're here at Cornell. First of all, Cornell is doing a lot of things. The Department of Sustainability and things like that, and those are all good things. But it's not nearly enough. Think about what university would be the best positioned university of every university in this country to do climate change research. You might want a university that excelled in engineering and certainly agriculture, that really knows what they're talking about when it comes to chemistry, medicine, biology. It'd be great if they had an architecture school because buildings give off 40% of all the greenhouse gases. Hospitality, labor relations, human ecology. That might be a really good place to do research on climate change, wouldn't it? Well, here we are. This is the place. So what I propose is that Cornell embark on a serious program to do climate change research. I think a minimum of $1 billion. When you take a look, we're raising $4 billion now, and you take a look, it's for biology and for the West Campus and things like that. I would think that this would be a higher priority. Because if we're talking about 100 years from now, Cornell might not be here otherwise. Sounds dramatic, but I really wish I was just telling you this science fiction story that wasn't really true. I really wish that was the case, but unfortunately, I don't believe that's the case. Now, the good news is if Cornell does this, not only will it help address a serious problem, but even if you ignore that, even if you ignore any moral reason for doing climate change research, it will probably be the best thing that ever happened to the university in that when Cornell gets money for research. Well, that's where the money's going to be. So why not work on the research where there's going to be great funding and will raise the prestige of the university? My company's based in Berkeley, and UC Berkeley has got a $500 million research grant from BP to work on biofuels. And I can tell you there that at UC Berkeley, it's a very exciting time. The students and professors are very exciting, taking whatever their research area is, of focusing on energy. So there's a lot of excitement there. I just went to a meeting, another benefit of this, by the way, I just went to a meeting of Engineers for a Sustainable World, which started at Cornell. It's now based out in San Francisco. And I went to this meeting, and it's college students who are interested in sustainability. Half the people in the audience were women. And I'll tell you, I'm on the engineering advisory group, that's a big problem here in many of the engineering disciplines, is getting women involved. So there's a lot of positive things that come from doing this. So I don't want to end on I need to also end on a happy note, so there is some good news. I've been talking to politicians and people involved in environment, things like that, and I've been told, I hope they're right, that within 2 years, the United States will have a cap-and-trade system. Basically, that puts a limit on a carbon. The first limit is sort of wherever we're at, and then every year it decreases by 2%, so that by 2050, you're down to a very low level. No excuses. If you still need to burn carbon, you have to buy a credit to do it, and that credit's going to get more and more expensive over time. So it's a really good thing because everything else we're talking about today flows from that. All biofuels become more cost-effective, all the energy savings, efficiency, alternative fuels, all those things become more cost-effective and become a requirement, actually, within a few decades. And Europe's already doing this, and then people will argue, well, why should we do this if China and India aren't going to do it? Well, the answer is they're not going to do it until we do it. And then I think with the data that will be coming in over the next 5 years as the Arctic melts, as just one small example, I think the attention on this will focus on China and India, and they'll get on board as well. And also, as what we'll talk about the rest of the conference too, there's tremendous economic opportunities. I was involved in Ask Jeeves during the internet crazy times. People said the internet would change the world. Well, you know what? The internet did change the world. But there were a lot of winners. I said there were a few winners, a lot of losers. Well, I'll tell you, this opportunity, this economic opportunity makes the internet just pale in comparison. The market for liquid transportation fuels is $1 trillion a year. So if you can have a piece of that, if you had a carbon-free way of doing that, you can make a lot of money. You'll also make the world a better place at the same time. So it's a great, it's sort of a scary time, but it's also a very exciting time. And I hope that all of you will get involved. Thank you.